The United Nations says that refugees engaging in a hunger strike at an Australian detention center is a sign of the unbearable conditions that they are enduring. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, says that she has been alarmed to learn the asylum seekers situation. They're being held under Australia's offshore processing laws on the tiny island of Nauru, were starving themselves. Canberra's move is said to be aimed at deterring refugees from paying people smugglers for passage from Southeast Asia. A majority of the 400 asylum seekers on Nauru were reported to be on hunger strike earlier this week, but most called off their action on Tuesday, following news of an Amnesty International visit next week. Let's switch over to Sydney, joined by Press TV's correspondent, Daniel Pizarro. Daniel, what can you tell us about this situation? Obviously, it is one of extreme conditions. Tell me the information that you have overall on the conditions of these individuals.
Well, hello there. Well, yes, the detention centre at Nauru has only been reopened for the past couple of months, and at the moment it's all in temporary accommodation. Detainees are there in tents, in very hot conditions, of course, because Nauru is out there in the South Pacific Ocean, nearer to the equator, and the conditions have been described by detainees as unbearable. And we have seen, of course, that a couple of detainees have chosen to go back to the places that they're fleeing from, namely Sri Lanka. And this, of course, comes at a time when thousands upon thousands of refugees are coming into Australia. In fact, this year, we've had almost 15,000 refugees arrive into Australian waters, and that is a record. And the detention centres at Nauru, they're supposed to be more of a deterrence factor. The federal government says that they're supposed to warn asylum seekers that if you come by a boat, you will not be given any advantages. If you come here, you will be put into detention for up to, they say, 5 years. But if you do it through the official channels, through the United Nations, then you would still be able to get processed and then come to Australia in maybe less time. However, we have now seen that many people who are detained in Nauru have really started complaining about this temporary accommodation. It is only supposed to be temporary when the permanent buildings will be rehabilitated, but it's still, of course, taking up a lot of time. And we're basically getting the feeling that Nauru could soon reach capacity sooner rather than later. And this also comes for the detention centre on Papua New Guinea's Manus Island, which is part of the same scheme. And we have refugee advocates saying that sooner or later, then asylum seekers should either be processed on Australia's mainland, or that detainees should be released into the community where they could be looked after, and then their visa applications can be looked at under a specific amount of time.
Well, it does seem that it is extreme, the reaction by the Australian government, and inhumane in keeping them in these conditions. If they're not going to accept and then send them back, and if they are, it seems that they would process them sooner. I'm just wondering, inside the country, human rights groups, has this made a lot of noise inside of the country or not, being that I'm sure that there should be other ways that these refugees could be treated?
Well, the nature of refugees in Australia is always a major topic, particularly at a federal level. And recent elections, of course, that we had, like back in 2001, we had the Tampa crisis, which helped John Howard to get re-elected in 2001. But we've also had more elections since that time, where refugees policies from the previous John Howard Liberal government time have come under greater scrutiny, particularly scandals like the Children Overboard affair, where the government claimed that asylum seekers were deliberately throwing their children into water, and we found that that actually wasn't correct. So the nature of asylum seekers is a very particular topic for Australian public, but often in many cases, once we get so many refugees coming in to Australia, there is that tendency for right-wing xenophobia to appear. Mm-hmm. And Australians, like the vast majority of Australians, we like to portray ourselves as a lucky country where we would welcome almost any person to come into this country to become Australian citizens. And we have seen, of course, over the past couple of years, not just on Nauru, but also when we had onshore detention centre processing. One centre in particular was in Woomera in central South Australia, where they had very hot conditions. We saw through the media the same hunger strikes. We saw detainees sewing their lips together and even in many ways setting fire to their buildings. And most refugee advocates, particularly those from the Australian Greens and some on the left of the Labor Party, say that it's better that if we have asylum seekers processed onshore, but we should also speed up the visa applications, and they should also be released to the community.
All right. Well, thank you so much from Sydney, Press TV's correspondent Daniel Pizarro. Well, you're watching Press TV's World News. Let's get you caught up on the hour's headlines again. EU capitals brace for new anti-austerity protests as the EU budget talks collapse.